My name is Lily. I work at a marketing firm downtown. It's a small company with maybe 20 people. I thought I was lucky to get this job. Fresh out of college. Good pay. Nice office. What could go wrong? Everything started normal. My boss, Mr. Davidson, seemed professional. He was in his 40s. Married. Had pictures of his family on his desk. He hired me as a junior marketing coordinator. The work was interesting. I helped with social media campaigns. I wrote copy for advertisements. I attended client meetings. For the first few months, everything was fine. Mr. Davidson was a good boss. He gave clear instructions. He praised my work when I did well. He offered constructive feedback when I made mistakes. I felt like I was learning and growing, but then things started to change. It began with small things. He would compliment my appearance more than my work. "You look nice today, Lily," he would say. At first, I thought he was just being friendly, but it happened more and more often. Then he started asking personal questions. "Do you have a boyfriend?" he asked one day. I told him I was single. I didn't think much of it. Coworkers talk about their personal lives all the time. But the questions kept coming. He wanted to know about my dating life, my weekend plans, my family. It felt like he was crossing a line. But I needed this job. I had student loans to pay. Rent was due every month. I couldn't afford to lose my income. The real problem started about 6 months into my job. Mr. Davidson began finding excuses to be alone with me. He would call me into his office for meetings that could have been emails. He would ask me to stay late to help with projects that weren't urgent. During these meetings, he would sit closer than necessary. He would touch my shoulder when he talked. He would lean in when looking at my computer screen. His hand would linger longer than it should when passing me documents. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't know what to do. He never said anything inappropriate directly. He never made explicit advances. It was all subtle, all deniable. If I complained, would anyone believe me? One evening, we were working late on a presentation. The office was empty except for us. He ordered dinner for both of us. "We make a good team," he said, looking at me intensely. "I think you have a lot of potential here." The way he said it made my skin crawl. There was an implication in his voice, a suggestion that my success depended on more than just my work performance. "Thank you, Mr. Davidson," I said, keeping my voice professional. "I really enjoy the work." "Call me Richard," he said. "We're past formalities, don't you think?" I forced a smile. Of course. But inside, I was screaming. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. But what could I do? The next day, I confided in my friend Jessica. We met for coffee after work. I told her everything. How uncomfortable I felt. How Mr. Davidson's behavior was escalating. How trapped I felt. "You need to report this," Jessica said firmly. "What he's doing is sexual harassment." "But he hasn't actually done anything," I protested. "He hasn't touched me inappropriately. He hasn't said anything explicit. It's all just implications." "That's still harassment," Jessica insisted. "You shouldn't have to deal with this." I knew she was right, but I was scared. What if reporting him made things worse? What if no one believed me? What if I lost my job? The situation got worse over the next few weeks. Mr. Davidson started sending me text messages outside of work hours. They started professional. "Don't forget about the Johnson presentation tomorrow." But they gradually became more personal. "Hope you're having a good evening." Thinking about our conversation today, I felt like I was being hunted. Even at home, I couldn't escape his attention. I started dreading going to work. My stomach would twist into knots every morning. I had trouble sleeping. I lost my appetite. One Friday afternoon, Mr. Davidson called me into his office. "Sarah, I want to talk about your career here," he said, closing the door behind me. My heart started racing. The closed door felt ominous. In the past, our meetings had been with the door open. "You've been doing excellent work," he continued. "I think you're ready for more responsibility. A promotion, perhaps." "That's wonderful," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. But something in his tone made me nervous. "Of course, promotions here depend on more than just work performance," he said, moving closer to where I was sitting. "They depend on loyalty, on being a team player, on building strong relationships with management." The way he emphasized relationships made my blood run cold. I knew exactly what he was implying. "I understand," I said quietly, even though I wanted to scream. "Good," he said, smiling. "I knew you were smart. Why don't we discuss this further over dinner? Tomorrow night. Just the two of us." My mouth went dry. I have plans tomorrow night." His smile faded slightly. "Cancel them. This is important for your career." It wasn't a request. It was an order, and the threat was clear. Play along or face the consequences. "Of course," I heard myself saying. "What time?" 8 o'clock. "I'll pick you up." I nodded and left his office. My hands were shaking. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew what this dinner meant. I knew what he expected from me. And I knew that my job depended on my response. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my options. I could quit. But then what? I didn't have another job lined up. I didn't have savings to live on while I looked for something new. And what if he gave me a bad reference? What if he told other employers I was difficult to work with? I could go to HR. But our HR department was just one person, Mrs. Chen. And she and Mr. Davidson seemed close. They had lunch together regularly. Would she really believe me over him? I could report him to higher management. But Mr. Davidson was a partner in the firm. The only people above him were the other partners. And they were all men. Would they take my word against their colleagues? Every option seemed hopeless. I felt trapped. Powerless. Like a mouse caught in a cat's claws. Saturday arrived too quickly. I spent the day in a fog of anxiety. I changed clothes 3 times, trying to find something professional enough to not send the wrong message, but nice enough to not anger him. At exactly 8 o'clock, Mr. Davidson texted me. "I'm outside." I looked out my window. There was his car. A black BMW. Expensive. Intimidating. Just like him. I walked outside on shaky legs. He got out to open the passenger door for me. "You look beautiful, Sarah," he said. I forced a smile. "Thank you." The restaurant was upscale. Dimly lit. Romantic. This wasn't a business dinner. This was a date. And I was trapped in it. During dinner, he ordered wine. Expensive wine. "To your bright future," he said, raising his glass. I barely touched mine. I needed to stay alert. Stay in control. As the evening progressed, his intentions became clearer. He talked about my potential. About how much he could help my career. About opportunities that could open up for me. All while his hand occasionally brushed mine across the table. "You know, Sarah," he said as we finished the main course, "I've grown quite fond of you. You're not just another employee to me." My heart was pounding. "Mr. Davidson, Richard," he corrected. And I hope you feel the same way about me. I stared at my plate. I couldn't look at him. I really appreciate everything you've done for my career. Good, he said. Because I'd like to take our relationship to the next level, both professionally and personally. There it was. The proposition I'd been dreading. Sleep with me, and your career will flourish. Refuse, and face the consequences. I excused myself to go to the bathroom. In the mirror, I looked at my reflection. I looked pale, scared, young. Too young to be dealing with this. I pulled out my phone and called Jessica. Jess, I need help, I whispered. Where are you? She asked immediately. I told her about the dinner, about Mr. Davidson's proposition, about how trapped I felt. You need to leave. Right now, she said. I don't care about your job. This is dangerous. But what will I do? How will I pay my bills? We'll figure it out, she said firmly. But you cannot stay in that situation. It will only get worse. Her words gave me strength. She was right. This was about more than just my job. This was about my dignity, my self-respect, my future. I went back to the table. Mr. Davidson was waiting with dessert menus. I took the liberty of ordering us chocolate cake, he said. We have a lot to celebrate. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I think there's been a misunderstanding. His expression darkened slightly. What do you mean? I mean I'm not interested in changing our professional relationship. I enjoy working for the company. But that's all this can be. The silence stretched between us. His jaw tightened. I see, he said finally. You know, Sarah, opportunities like this don't come along often. It would be a shame to waste them. I understand, I said. But my answer is no. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was cold, calculating. Well, he said, I suppose we'll see how you feel about that decision in the coming weeks. The threat was clear. I had rejected him. Now he would make me pay. The ride back to my apartment was silent. Mr. Davidson's jaw was clenched. His knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. I could feel his anger radiating through the car. When we arrived at my building, I thanked him politely and got out quickly. I watched from my window as he drove away. Only then did I allow myself to cry. The next week at work was a nightmare. Mr. Davidson was cold and distant. He criticized my work constantly. Projects I had been working on were reassigned to other people. He excluded me from important meetings. He made it clear that my refusal had consequences. But something had changed in me. Standing up to him, even in that small way, had given me courage. I started documenting everything, every inappropriate comment, every instance of retaliation, every text message. I also started looking for other jobs. I updated my resume. I reached out to contacts from college. I applied to positions at other companies. It was scary, but it was better than staying trapped. 2 weeks after the dinner, I found out that Mr. Davidson had done this before. Another woman who used to work at the company reached out to me. She had heard through mutual friends about my situation. He did the same thing to me, she told me over coffee. The late-night meetings, the personal questions, the dinner invitation. When I refused, he made my life hell until I quit. Why didn't you report him? I asked. I tried, she said sadly. But it was his word against mine, and he had more power, more influence. Nothing happened to him. But hearing her story gave me an idea. If there were 2 of us, maybe there were more. Maybe together, we could build a case that couldn't be ignored. Over the next few days, I quietly reached out to other women who had worked at the company. 3 more came forward, all with similar stories, all afraid to speak up alone. But together we were stronger. We decided to report him as a group. We compiled our evidence, our documented incidents, our witness statements. It was harder to dismiss 5 women than 1. The meeting with the other partners was terrifying, but we presented our case calmly and professionally. The evidence was overwhelming. Even they couldn't ignore it. Mr. Davidson was terminated 2 weeks later. The company issued a statement about their commitment to a safe workplace. They implemented new harassment policies. They brought in outside trainers. I got a new boss, a woman named Linda who was professional and respectful. My work environment improved dramatically. I could focus on my job instead of avoiding unwanted advances. 6 months later, I got a promotion. A real one. Based on my actual work performance. It felt amazing to be recognized for my skills rather than being seen as a potential conquest. Looking back on that experience, I realize how much it changed me. Before this happened, I was naive about workplace dynamics. I thought that if you worked hard and did a good job, you would be rewarded fairly. I thought that people in positions of authority could be trusted to act professionally. I thought that merit was the only thing that mattered in advancing your career. Those beliefs were shattered by my experience with Mr. Davidson. I learned that some people will abuse their power, that they will use their position to exploit others, that they will make your livelihood contingent on your willingness to submit to their desires. It was a harsh lesson, but it was also an important one. The most difficult part wasn't the harassment itself, though that was certainly traumatic. The most difficult part was feeling so alone and powerless. When someone has authority over your paycheck, over your career prospects, over your professional reputation, it creates an enormous imbalance of power. You feel like you have no choice but to endure their behavior, no matter how inappropriate or uncomfortable it makes you. I remember lying awake at night, playing out different scenarios in my head. What if I reported him and nothing happened? What if he fired me? What if he told other employers that I was a troublemaker? What if I could never find another job in marketing? These fears kept me silent for far too long. The isolation was perhaps the worst part. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone at work about what was happening. Mr. Davidson was well liked by most of the staff. He was charming and charismatic in public. He saved his inappropriate behavior for private moments. If I had spoken up, I worried that people would think I was overreacting or misinterpreting innocent interactions. Even outside of work, I struggled to explain the situation to friends and family. How do you describe that feeling of being hunted? How do you explain the way someone can make you feel uncomfortable without ever crossing obvious lines? How do you convey the constant state of anxiety that comes from never knowing when the next inappropriate comment or gesture will come? I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was reading too much into his behavior. Maybe he was just being friendly. Maybe I was being paranoid or oversensitive. This self-doubt made everything worse. It made me question my own perceptions and instincts. The psychological impact was significant. I became hypervigilant at work. I analyzed every interaction with Mr. Davidson. I rehearsed responses to potential scenarios. I planned escape routes from meetings. It was exhausting to be constantly on guard. My work performance actually suffered during this time, which created additional stress. I was so distracted by managing Mr. Davidson's behavior that I couldn't focus properly on my actual job responsibilities. I made more mistakes. I missed deadlines. I felt like I was failing at everything. The turning point came when I realized that this situation was bigger than just me. When I connected with other women who had experienced similar treatment, I understood that this was a pattern of behavior. Mr. Davidson wasn't just attracted to me specifically. He was a predator who systematically targeted young female employees. This realization was both horrifying and empowering. Horrifying because it meant that his behavior was calculated and deliberate. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had done it before, and he would continue to do it to other women if he wasn't stopped. But it was also empowering because it meant I wasn't alone. It meant I wasn't crazy or oversensitive. It meant that other people had witnessed and experienced similar behavior. Together, we had credibility and strength that none of us possessed individually. Finding the courage to speak up was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Even with the support of other women, I was terrified of the potential consequences. Would we be believed? Would anything actually change? Would there be retaliation against us for coming forward? But I realized that staying silent wasn't protecting me. It was only protecting him, and it was ensuring that other women would go through the same experience I had endured. I couldn't live with that knowledge. The process of reporting the harassment was difficult and emotionally draining. We had to relive traumatic experiences in detail. We had to defend our accounts against skeptical questioning. We had to risk our careers and professional reputations on the hope that justice would prevail. There were moments when I doubted our decision. When Mr. Davidson's allies in the company suggested that we were making a big deal out of nothing. When they implied that we were trying to destroy a good man's career over innocent misunderstandings. When they asked why we hadn't spoken up sooner if we were really being harassed. These responses were infuriating and demoralizing. They showed how deeply ingrained these power dynamics are in our society. How often victims are blamed for not speaking up, while perpetrators are protected and excused. How women's concerns are dismissed as overreactions or misinterpretations. But we persisted. We stuck together. We supported each other through the investigation process. We reminded each other that we were doing the right thing, even when it felt like the whole world was against us. The day Mr. Davidson was fired was both triumphant and anticlimactic. On one hand, justice had been served. He would no longer be able to harass other women at our company. The other partners had taken our concerns seriously and acted appropriately. On the other hand, the damage had already been done. The months of stress and anxiety couldn't be undone. The impact on my mental health and work performance couldn't be erased. The lesson that workplaces aren't always safe spaces had been learned permanently. Recovery took time. Even after Mr. Davidson was gone, I found myself jumpy around male authority figures. I second-guessed my instincts. I worried that I was seeing threats where none existed. It took months of therapy to rebuild my confidence and trust in my own perceptions. But I also grew stronger. I learned that I was capable of standing up for myself, even in terrifying circumstances. I learned the importance of solidarity with other women. I learned that speaking truth to power, while difficult, is sometimes necessary for justice to prevail. Most importantly, I learned that my worth as a person and as an employee isn't dependent on anyone else's approval or desire. My skills, my work ethic, and my character are what matter. No one has the right to make my livelihood contingent on my willingness to submit to their inappropriate advances. Today, I work for a different company. I love my job. I have a boss who respects me as a professional and treats me with dignity. I've been promoted twice based purely on my merit and contributions. I feel valued for who I am and what I bring to the organization. But I haven't forgotten the lessons I learned from my experience with Mr. Davidson. I'm more aware of power dynamics in the workplace. I'm more attuned to inappropriate behavior. I'm more willing to speak up when I see something wrong. I also try to support other women who find themselves in similar situations. I volunteer with organizations that help victims of workplace harassment. I mentor young women entering the workforce. I share my story when it might help someone else find the courage to speak up. The experience was traumatic, but it also taught me important things about my own strength and resilience. It showed me the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's scary. It demonstrated the power of women supporting each other in the face of abuse. I wish I had spoken up sooner. I wish I had trusted my instincts from the beginning. I wish I had understood that I had rights and options, even in a difficult situation. But I can't change the past. I can only learn from it and use those lessons to help others. The workplace harassment I experienced is unfortunately common. Too many women face similar situations. Too many feel trapped and powerless. Too many suffer in silence because they're afraid of the consequences of speaking up. But things are changing. The conversations around workplace harassment are evolving. Companies are implementing better policies. People are more aware of these issues. Victims are finding their voices and demanding justice. There's still work to be done, but progress is being made. And that gives me hope. If you've ever felt like me, you're not alone. Your instincts are probably right. Your feelings are valid. You deserve to work in an environment where you're respected and valued for your contributions, not seen as a potential conquest. Don't let anyone make you feel like your career depends on anything other than your skills and work ethic. And remember, speaking up is scary, but staying silent often makes things worse. Find allies. Document everything. Trust yourself. You're stronger than you know, and you deserve better than what you're accepting. Your voice matters, and there are people who will listen and help if you find the courage to use it.